This is the last talk of the day, and you know that in between this and beers, there's a security talk, and you are here for a security talk, right? Okay, at least you're in the right place. It's fine, because there are much better talks over there about how to use IntelliJ for a game engine or something like that. That's fun, but this is real life stuff. And first thing I want to ask you all, like, who recognizes this? Who actually knows where this is located? King's Cross Station, exactly, I heard of King's Cross Station in London. And this is obviously a reference to the Harry Potter movies, because Platform 9 and 3/4 does not exist for the normal people. You have Platform 9 and Platform 10, but only if you are at the right time, at the right moment, with the right tools, and you perform the right action and giving the right amount of force at the right place, you magically come into Platform 9 and 3/4. Who of you is a Java developer? Or a developer? Or thinks about software or ever used software? Yeah, that. We always think if we build software like, works on my machine, it's great. I tested it, it's fine. But if you probably put this in production and somebody has enough time and puts the right amount of force with the right tools and the right place, they will probably get in if you don't take countermeasures. Let's get first to the point, how do we develop software? And watch me, this screen will be white, so it will be like in your face. So, say we have a very nicely scoped application, right? It's a proof of concept, an MVP. And we all know that if you have a proof of concept and it goes into production, it stays in production because it works. And then your product manager comes up to you and is like, you know, from our product perspective, it makes sense with your proof of concept to build this tiny little feature on top of your application. And you're like, okay, sure, scope is still small, but okay, sure, tiny little feature. Works fine. And you're happy with this, you're super happy with this. And then that top level manager comes to you and says the magic words. From a product perspective, or from a functional perspective, it makes sense if we couple this to your application, because it's better for our customers. And you're like, sure, but that is not how we designed the application. The foundation is not built to build this on top of it. Yeah, but we already have it, so we can reuse it, right? And you're like, sure. And then the next product manager comes up, or the next top-level manager comes up like, but if we can do that, we probably can do this as well, and we can do this as well, and we end up with an application that was a proof of concept and now can fly helicopters and talk to the moon. If I draw this out as a structural building, you're like, this is insane. But guess what? In most enterprise applications, we do this. Do you think this is safe? Do you want to live in this building with your family? Hold that thought. Because, again, if you put the right amount of force at the right spot, at the right time in the life cycle of the application, either it collapses or we get in. My name is Brian. I work for Sneak. Sneak is a software security company. We create software development tooling for developers to make security easier and implementable in their life cycle. And not just at the end, but may start at the beginning. Then you have the boring stuff, Java champion, virtual user, Java jug leader, NL jug leader. I am from the Netherlands, which probably you can hear from my accent. Anyway, boring slide, because we need to go into stuff. Who of you uses databases in their application? Or has used databases, knows what a database is? Sure, so we can talk about SQL. You all know how SQL works, right? You have written SQL, pure SQL. So who can tell me what these two things in SQL mean? The semicolon and the double dash. Semicolon means end of statement. Dash dash means comment. These are a SQL injection hacker best friends. So I have an application over here. This application works, but unfortunately the implementation of searching the product does not yet work. Nowadays, we used to do this by looking into, I don't know, Stack Overflow, Wikipedia, or anywhere on the internet, or ask a colleague. But nowadays, we have Copilot, right? So I can ask Copilot, search by description or product name, and it will come up with just sure, whatever, yes, I believe it, no, I don't want this, return result list, yep, looks good to me. Sure, let's rerun it. Well, let's push it to production. Right? Copilot wrote this for me. Who of you does code reviews? The rest of you does pair programming? Hopefully. And guess what? Is it pair programming if I am the pair programmer to an AI, a generative AI tool? Did you already see what we did here? What Copilot did here? Guess what? You will see over here that if I would save this and I would rescan it with my tool, and I will scan it in the background, it will come up with, Brian, you created your first SQL injection. So this is an easy one to spot, even with basic code reviews. Because what happens here, I have the input, and the input is getting to a lowercase, and without doing any form of sanitization or validation, I concatenate the input to the actual query string and push it to the database. Which means I can interfere with the execution order of a SQL statement. And what I mean with the execution order is, because it's in one go and I send it over there, I can stop it, remove it, do other things. Guess what? If I go back to the application now, and over here I can now search for coffee. Right? Yes, it comes back, it works. But what I can do as well is do something like this. See? End of statement. Then I say, did I tell you that I'm Dutch? I like free stuff. I'm a cheapskate. Update product, set price to 0, and then I say dash dash. So basically I'm saying, in that first input, I'm just ignoring the rest of it, and I'm just updating my products. And if I submit, you will now see that, nothing happens. But if I refresh over here, all the prices are 0, and my Dutch heart pounds even harder and harder. And then you probably say, yeah, sure, but we could have caught this with real proper code reviews. Sure. Do you actually do code reviews? Or is it like, I create an application, I create functions, I create new features, 20,000 lines of code. Hey, junior in my team, we have like 4 more hours before it needs to go live. Please review it. So 2 people looked at it and it can now go to production? Yes, I'm exaggerating over here, but that is what happened. Did you pick the right person for the code review? Actually, if we expand this by using Copilot or any other tool, can we actually still keep up with this? If you don't know what you're doing, you're actually born to, or actually bridge you to failure here. So what would be the solution over here? Say this is my code again. Well, over here you can already see that I changed the code, and over here my tool says, hey, Brian, all good, but there is some SQL injection problem here on line 33, and it says, if you go to this is the controller, and if you go to the search product, yeah, you have an issue, which is fine. But what is the way to solve this? And now people are quiet, like, I have no clue. I'm an engineer. I have a security team to work this out. Probably people will say prepared statements. Other people will say parameterized queries. It's not or, it's with. Using as much as possible, depending on your language, prepared statements and parameterized queries. And I will tell you why. Because what happens with a prepared statement is, this is the normal Java code that you wrote in Java 1.3, 4. You have the SQL injection here, and, well, that. If you use the prepared statement, then you do it over there, and you put as a parameterized query, you put it in. Okay, sure, but I'm using Spring Boot here. Like nobody writes the things like that. Well, first of all, we need to know what a prepared statement is. If I have a prepared statement, I send the query with the question marks or the wildcards to the database. I let the database already configure what the execution path is. The database already does its work and creates the execution path. Then in a second step, I will provide the variable to the database as well. So I let the DBMS solve it for me. Because the execution order is already created, computed, I cannot interfere with that anymore. And therefore, prepared statements are the best way to go. If you use prepared statements, yes, then the best way is to get the parameter as a parameterized query, because that's the second step. In some languages, like in some Node libraries, there is no way to do a prepared statement, and they do escaping on the client side. And therefore, it can still be that it's one escaped SQL query that goes over the line instead of in 2 steps. But how do we solve this normally? Well, I'm using Spring Boot over here. First way to solve this, I can do a prepared statement over here. Sure, I have it already in my fix library. Obviously, I prepared this. So the one thing that I can do over here is replace all of this with new code, something like this. And this is just one, oh, that's not my intention. And this is just one example. And now I remove the lower input, which I should have kept. Yes. Over here, remove it, put it in, and uncommented. So what you can see here, over here, I'm using a $1, and if needed in somewhere else, I can use a $2. And as a separate way, I am installing the queries over here. Well, I'm using Spring. I'm using Spring Boot, in this case, with JPA. Who says that Spring Boot with JPA is using prepared statements? The best answer is it depends, because JPA is a reference implementation. You have no clue. So what is the default what's the default implementation of JPA in Spring? Anyone? Just scream. Hibernate, ? Exactly. Does Hibernate by default use prepared statements? Luckily, the answer is yes. So yes, because we use JPA doesn't mean we use Hibernate. We use JPA. It can be anything. It can be a self-made implementation of JPA. So even though this code looks safe, you need to know what the implementation is underneath it. And you probably would say, but I'm using Spring Boot. I can also use things like, what is it, the interfaces that Spring Boot divides for me to create such an application, like this. I can do exactly the same thing with a Spring Boot interface, a JPA interface. It's now find product by product name containing ignore case or description containing, wow, that's a long, long name. Yes, this works. So out of the box, your JPA interfaces do this, because if they use Hibernate, they use prepared statements, and they do it the right way. But you have to know what your implementation is. But what if your SQL is a little bit more complicated? You need to use unions or joins. Then you need to go to the create native query, and you need to do it yourself, as I did it over here, for instance, by putting the wildcards in here, like the $1. So what is, if we sum this up, this little thing, this starter up, what should we do? When we use JPA in Spring, which is one of the most used interfaces, check your implementation. Know which version of JPA you're using, what kind of implementation you're using. If you're using the defaults, it's fine. But if you're working on a larger stack and you have no control over the platform, it might be another one. Yes, use your JPA repository, because it not only makes it easier, it abstracts it away. And if you know your implementation, it will be fine. And secondly, if you use a native query, make sure that you use name parameters, because with the native query, like create native, like I used here, and your name parameters, and the right implementation, you will have that as well. Use it in this order. First use the repository, and then use the native query, because it will abstract something away from you you don't have to worry about anymore. So this was a starter, right? SQL injection, we've all seen this like a dozen times. Sure. Let's get to the next one. File uploads. Like, we want to upload a file. Basically, I have this application. This is the same application. It's a Spring Boot application with Timeleaf, and I want to choose a file, and I want to upload an image. Nothing special. So how should I do that? So over here, I have this. Oh, let me restart it. And hopefully it works. Of course not. I need to have a return statement, of course. Return result list, fine. Whatever you want, boss. So let's get into the application. I can log in with my username, which is Brian, and my password, which is I work at a security company. This is totally fine. No, don't save it. In my profile here, I can upload files. I can upload images. I can upload an avatar. But I'm not just going to do this. I'm going to look at the code, how I implement this. And this is code I copied from a tutorial. But if we look at the problems over here, it says, Brian, you have a path traversal problem over here. And that's what we're going to explore. So if we go into path traversal, you will see that I'm going into my upload controller. And over here is the application, or here is the function that gets the file in. The file comes in as a multi-part file. The multi-part file is nothing more than a POJO, a representation in an object, which actually is the representation of a post request. Yeah? One thing I do here, I'm taking the original file name, replacing spaces by underscores, and what I do then, I'm taking the file name and path, and which is the upload directory, which is /uploads, as you can see over here, and I concatenate the image name. But what I'm not doing is actually looking at the image name. What is the image name? What if my image name is something like ///////////////////////////////// whatever. This is what we call path traversal. Basically, when we're gonna do this, it's gonna traverse all the way back to, in this case, the root, then going into @c/patchwd, and I might be able to overwrite a file outside of the context that I have. This can be either the context of your application or even broader. Say I'm running this application in a Docker file or in a Docker container. What is the default user in Docker? Root. If you don't specify a lesser privileged user, you're running it as root, which means I can access the whole Docker container, including your operating system files, including maybe, I don't know, if you have other parts running or no, maybe I can install files and later call them. So this is kind of a thing that you don't want. So is this actually possible? Well, like, sure, if I do curl, it's not even possible to do .. .. Well, for that, I'm going to use a little tool we call Burp Suite. Burp Suite is a tool for educational purposes only, or for pen testing. And I'm not going to use the full Burp Suite. I'm going to use a little part of it, which is the proxy. And the proxy just records all my post requests. So if I'm going into my proxy and I'm opening a browser that's connected to the proxy, we can record all these post requests. So hopefully, yes, please, now, yes, thank you. So localhost 8082 comes to my thing, and it blocks, obviously. Let's try it again. It's always with demos, right? If you do live demos, it works 10 times out of 10 if you do it not on stage, and then you try it, and now I can log in. Right. So Brian, yes, password, I won't tell you. Yeah, sure. Profile picture, upload the profile picture, choose the file. Let's get to pictures and make, I don't know, this. Open it. And if I upload the file, you will now see that in my profile I have the picture. Great, you would say. What goes wrong? Well, if we look at the HTTP history, we will see that over here we have the post request that upload the image. If we go in there, we will see the request and the response. Response in HTTP 200, but I want to go into the request. So let's send this to my repeater. And in my repeater, I can play with this. So the red part over here is the content, is the body, is the actual picture. Nothing special. But the fun part is that the file name is just metadata. So I can do .. and so now it will not end up in my upload folder, but in the root of my project, so I can still find it and not pollute my machine, just for easiness. And if I do this, and I send this, I will get a HTTP 200. But if I look in my project again, let's see that in the root now, there is a hello BCN, which was not there before. Which means in the upload folders, you have the profile 800 that I uploaded before. As you can see over here, this one. But I broke out of the upload folder, and now in the root of my project, But it also means I can break out further depending what the user is that I'm running this process with. Is it a root user? Is it a more privileged user? And if I'm able to get a more privileged user, how can I interfere with that? I can overwrite files. And for instance, we have examples in another application that we overwrite rag files that are imported into an LLM, and therefore we let the LLM do weird things, which is super fun, but not if it's in production. So overwriting files can be harmful. Well, I can even install maybe zip files in this case, which is my Bitcoin miner. And if you run it in your Docker container as root, I just run it, and you won't even notice. It's great. Let's do more of this. So how should we solve this? Like, as you can see here, they say fix the issue with path reversal, but our AI is not fast, so I will do it manually. What we have to do is and before we write, we need to look at the file name and path to make sure that it actually works. What I can do, obviously, is not use the original file name and create my own file name. That is the best solution, because then you know what's going on. However, in some cases, you need to preserve the file name, the original file name, because, I don't know, you want to have the user see the original file name as it was. I don't know your use case. But if you do, what you want to do over here is make an if statement, something like, let's say, file name and path dot normalize, and it starts with upload directory. If it does not start with the upload directory, so what I do, file path dot normalize normalizes the dot slash into where it actually will be. And if it does not start with the upload directory, but something else like, I don't know, /bin/library, I just throw a new IO exception invalid file path. And in this case, I now have prevented it and I sanitized it at very least that we cannot get out of the file path. So this is one of the solutions that you can do, but we need to be aware of this because I'll let this generate by how do you call it? By Copilot, but most of this stuff is literally copy-pasted from a tutorial. Most people knew about SQL injection. Who knew about path reversal in this way? Thank you, I appreciate you. That means you had more education than most people that come from university now. And that's the thing. Maybe you can catch it. But what about that new junior in your team? Because we need to ramp up, we need to produce more software, we now have Gen AI. Go for it. Will that create more or less vulnerabilities? I know I now sound like a politician, but probably it will create more things. So why not have tools in your IDE or during your life cycle that can catch it early so you cannot get away with it without being notified, like I did before. So if I would do this, it would not be possible anymore. And probably if the thing will be scanned, it will be away. There's no path reversal in my list anymore. This is great. So yeah, we talked about path reversal, we talked about SQL injection. Cool. Examples. So what is the file name? We need to look at that. And then we need to be sure that if the file name contains what does it traverse to? And we need to know what traversal is. Something I did not learn during my years as my formal education during university years in my software engineering curriculum. I learned it after the fact. Actually, I learned this 4 years ago while I was working at Sneak, like, oh, this is possible, and how can I hack it? Next one, who of you uses XML? Probably if you need to work with legacy systems, you probably need to use XML, right? Who knows about external entities and doc type definitions? Right, doc type definitions normally get used to have an external file check your XML file to see if it is valid. But doc type definitions are created, and external entities are created in such a way that we can misuse it. So let me show you. We have the application over here, and I can first let me quit Burp Suite to save a little space. That's great. So in my application over here, I have my orders. And my orders, I can export it in XML. I can also import it. Well, let me show you some nice XML. So the nice XML is the normal export. And the normal export looks kind of okay, right? I've got orders, it has an ID, it has a date, an ID, a number, a product name, and a price. Nothing special. You're like, okay, cool. But I can also change this a little bit and misuse doc type definitions. Because with doc type definitions and external entities, I can not only connect to DTD files, I can connect to any file. So what I do here, I create a doc type definition, foo, that has an entity xxe, and it has a system file /etc/passwd. So basically, I'm going to my passwd file on my macOS machine. It's bound to the variable name xxe, and instead of the product name, I just pushed out xxe over here. So let's see if this works. So let's go to the application again. Let's import, choose the files, get the xxe.xml, open it, and let's see. I submit it, and what you now see here, as part of the product description, you have the content of my passwd file, because it's accessible for whatever reason. Which means you now have a breach of integrity. You have a breach of, well, basically, you have a data leak. Probably you need XML for communication with old web services, or old implementations, or old integrations. You need to check this, because there are still parsers that are delivered by the JDK that have this by default on, because doc type definitions and external entities are considered a feature. That's how I got away with a lot of things during my engineering years. Like, no, this is not a bug, this is a feature. Really? Well, this actually is considered a feature, so you have to put specific things in to make sure that the parser does not do things. So I have used the SAX parser here, the simple API for XML. And what I need to do is, I need to XML reader set a feature that says disallow doc types, that I cannot use doc types at all, and I have to set the feature general external entities set to false to make sure that both doc type definitions and external entities are not usable anymore. If I rerun this now and I retry this, you will get an error because it says doc type definitions are not allowed. I can also do only the external entities, but then still there are different ways of misusing doc type definitions, which I do not have the time for to go into depth. But these are considered defaults, as in feature defaults. If you go, for instance, to C#, all the XML parsers that come with the C# core have this off by default, and you have to set it on, which would, in my opinion, be a better default solution. But yeah, most people don't know this, because who reads documentation of the libraries that they're actually using? One person. Thank you. I appreciate that as well, because not a lot of people do that. So this is a thing. If I'm going back here, I'm trying to re-import a file, that file now, boom, SAX parser error. Now at least you get an error, and you should not put your errors on the page. Yes, I know. But this is for demo purposes, because now people know what's going on, and we can refactor it around it. A complete other story. But even though with simple things as XML parsing, things can go wrong if you don't know how your library works. So now you know. These two things, disallow doc types declarations set to true, and external general entities set to false. This is for, specifically for the SAX parser, but the DOM parser has the same problem. You only have to put it in a different, you only have to use a different method for that to set these things. Or use a third-party library, but why would you use a third-party library if the JDK already provides you XML parsing? I don't know. Let's skip this one for a second, just to make sure that we are going to this one, because I think this one is important, and I want to keep within time. Who is a cryptography expert here? Good. Some people are like, meh. If you didn't study cryptography and you don't create your own cryptography algorithms for a living, you're not a cryptographer. Don't create your own cryptography. First of all, just a question. When to use hashing and when to use encryption? If you cannot answer that question, we have to have a talk, because the first thing is, do you need to retrieve the original data? If it's a yes or a no. If it's a no, like for instance passwords, you don't need to retrieve the original data. You just need the hash. If the hash is always the same hash, you can just compare the hashes, and then you can go through yes or no. If a system, if you put that button like retrieve password or put new password in, and it retrieves actually your password, please run. Because either they use encryption, which means even the database administrator can come to your, retrieve your password, or they store it as plain text or something like that, or they use, I don't know, base 64 encoding or whatever. Not good. If it is hash, nobody can retrieve it. We can only get the hash one way. It's a one-way algorithm. I won't go into full cryptography because that is not my background. I just know the basics. But enough to teach you a few things. If you currently want to use passwords in your system, what is the best way to do it? The best way is to offload this to somebody else. And I'm serious, use a provider to do this. I won't say use a specific provider to do this, but you can choose your provider that works for you. But normally, you don't want to do it. But if you need to do it, say if you want to hash your passwords, what is currently the best hashing algorithm for password hashing? Uh-oh. Okay, I'll give you three options. Is it PBKDF2? Is it bcrypt? Is it scrypt? Or is it Argon2? Choose. And you're like, well, I don't know. And that's fine, because we are developers. You can ask ChatGPT. Actually, if you look into it, currently the best algorithm is Argon2 ID. Not Argon2I, not Argon2D, but Argon2 ID. And why? It is a trade-off between a memory use attack and a side panel attack. So it is a nice algorithm for regular usage of password encryption. However, don't just use it blindly. You need to know how to use it, with which memory usage, which kind of parallelization you use it, and how many times you want to parallelize it. The more memory you use, the less parallelization you need. The lesser memory you use, the more parallelization the more recursion you need. I did not make this up. There is a website from the OWASP Foundation that has a cheat sheet, and I know the person that keeps track of this one, which is Java champion Jim Manico, and he keeps track of it because every time I do this presentation, I need to check if the numbers are still right. Which also means that tomorrow, it might not be Argon2 ID anymore. It might be another thing. So if I'm going to my application, and again, this is a Spring Boot application, right? Let's go into the code. And what I'm doing here is I have my security configuration. And as you can see over here, I am using PBK-DF2 password encoder. If I want to change this to Argon2 ID password encoder, and password encoder is the wrong word, but let's not get into systematics because it's password hasher, it's not an encoding. But okay, I forgive Spring for that. So I can just include the Argon2 ID one. Like over here, of course I made a note of it because I'm a bad programmer and I can only program with Copilot. And I probably need to include things. So I can use Argon2 ID with it and then put the hash length in, the parallelization in, the amount of memory, and put that up to speed however you can. And now my application uses, for the password encoding, actually uses Argon2 ID, and I will actually show it. It's that easy. But there's a downside. I will come to that in a second. It's like, this is great for greenfield applications. So I'm going to my application over here. I think it's up. Great. Let's go into the console, and if I go into the people and I run this, you will now see that the encrypted password uses Argon2 ID, and you see the parameters with it. And this is the way Argon2 ID publishes the parameters in a readable way, and after that the hash. So people always know with what kind of parameters this one is encoded, so you can decode, or you can do the encoding again to actually connect the hashes. Now the thing is up to you. It's like, okay, this works now. This is great. I do it. This is perfect. But what about tomorrow? What about next week? What about in a year from now? Because you know this was a proof of concept. And if a proof of concept is in production, it will be in production for almost forever. So you need to think of it. How are we going to invalidate passwords? What if we need to upgrade the algorithm to a newer version because we need to be secure, specifically if you work for banks, insurance companies, or government? And that's the thing that comes into play when you are doing things. So I can just change this and say, all passwords are now gone and everybody should create a new password. Good luck. Maybe that is a strategy. Maybe you want to invalidate everything and the next time somebody comes up or somebody logs in, they need to push in a new password, so you need to have two columns, the old one and the new one. But you need to think of this beforehand. And yes, if you were at the last presentation of DevBcn that says, like, just make sure that it works now. But if you think about security and you know that these things will change, and you know now because I'm telling you, this can change, this will change. Even the parameters will change. Make sure that you have a strategy to update. Specifically if you work in critical environments and critical companies where security is essential. So just changing the algorithm, super easy. Migrating, that's a whole different story, and that really, really depends on how you are prepared to do this. Best way is to have an old and a new value, and then make sure that if you log in, people populate the new value by pushing in a new password. That is the easy way, but you have to provide that. And if you provide that from the beginning, then updating is quite easy, because then you can do it over and over again. But in most cases, this is not something you think about when you build the application from the start. So, okay, this was encryption, or sorry, hashing. You know, Argon 2 ID. This is currently the best hashing algorithm for passwords. Oh yeah, I wrote a blog post around it. This will get published, so you don't have to remember this. So yes, as in, if we need to retrieve the data back to the original data, say a credit card number, or I don't know, anything that doesn't need to be human readable, but a credit card number is the most touchable thing. We need encryption. And most of the time, we need symmetric encryption. Sorry, I was looking for that word. Currently, the best way to do that is AES, the Advanced Encryption Standard, symmetric for symmetric encryption. And for that, the current way is to at least use 128 bits of a key and use a secure mode. And then you're like, okay, but what is a mode? Well, AES is a block cipher, which basically means it will encrypt in blocks, mostly in 128-bit blocks. But most messages are longer than 128 bits. So how to use multiple blocks, and that we use in different modes. Sometimes we do it individual, sometimes one is the input to the other, sometimes there needs to be an extra seed in it. Like, there are ways to do this. And some ways there are secure, some ways are considered insecure. Currently, the secure way is either use GCM or CCM, and you don't have to remember this. Just know that, look at authentication modes and look at what kind of encryption is now the best way to do it. And then you're like, okay, but we're using encryption. Is that encryption still valid in my application? Well, if I'm going to my application, what we see over here is I have a ton of problems in open source, but one of the things here, it says use of broken or risky cryptography algorithm. Because I implemented this a while ago, and I'm using, not AES, I'm using DES, the predecessor of AES. And DES is considered weak now, because there are so many ways to attack it. It was great 10 years ago, or great 5 years ago, but not anymore. And this can happen to AES as well. So, because this is about encryption and things to retrieve your from your application, and you might need that in your application as well, this is something you need to keep track of, and it would be fun, or it would at least be easy, if you know that something is out of date. So what I did over here, I already created an AES version. So what I can do over here is, let's see where the DES is used. Oh, what I can do is just remove this and see where it breaks, right? That's how you program. Just remove this one. Okay, let's go to AES and uncomment everything I did, because pretend this is GitHub Copilot working for me. And now see if it breaks. I know where it breaks, but I cannot find it. Yes, in the product controller. Great, because it says service and I can boot the service AES. Okay, great. Problem solved, I guess. Not yet. Encryption server, here's also DES, and needs to be AES. So this needs a little work to rewrite this. And I just copy-pasted the AES implementation somewhere from the internet, and I hope it works. It does. It at least compiles. But if we go back to here, and let me, just for hits and giggles, rescan this, you will see that in my code, I still have a small little issue, because even though I am using AES, it is now a medium vulnerability, but it says the use of broken or risky encryption, because I'm not using the right mode. I'm using CBC instead of GCM. So even though an encryption algorithm might be good, the mode you're using it in is just as important. And moving it over there is quite easy. Just change it, and you need to change a few things, like a new parameter instead of the old parameter. And I just found out because it broke, and it gave me a hint in the exception. And if I would rescan this now, it will come back to me, and I don't have any, hopefully when it scans right, I won't have any problems with my encryption anymore, because now I use AES with the GCM. The thing is, I know nothing about encryption, but I have the obligation, because I'm using encryption, to know what is the current standard. I have tools with me that can help me, but in the end, I am responsible as either a lead programmer or a programmer that is responsible for this part of the application. And you need to revisit this every once in a while, because what's safe now, what's considered safe now, can be considered insecure later on. So if a tool can help me with that by, for instance, scanning my GitHub repository or doing this in my IDE, that will be very, very helpful. All right. Yes, done. Who uses libraries and frameworks? Who knows whatever libraries they're actually using and what kind of classes are actually in your class path? Oops, nobody. Because you're using Spring, and Spring is one starter and brings out a gazillion classes. The thing is, if this is your application, this is the code you wrote, and most of us did code reviews. But who actually reviews their frameworks and their libraries? I was in a bank once, and I looked to the Maven file, and I found 3 different XML parsers in it, because things build on top of other things, on top of other things, on top of other. Nobody just removed it, but it's part of your class path in most cases. So we need to think about that. One of the things is consuming YAML, and I'm not going to demo this because I only have 6 minutes left. If you're still who's still on Spring Boot 2? Great. Because if you're Spring Boot 2, then definitely you will be using snakeyaml 1.x. Actually, until Spring Boot 3.1, it was using snakeyaml 1 version. And snakeyaml 1 version had this little thing. As in, if I want to consume YAML, it loads the YAML file in a stream, and then it converts it to an object, which basically means whatever is in it, I just push it into the object thing. And after that, I'm trying to parse it, which means that it's already in your system. If I'm using YAML in Spring Boot or with snakeyaml, I can either, I'm actually going to show it anyway. The good YAML would look something like this. Hey, I could give a hint to the compiler here. I'm using this class, and this is the data. But the problem is, the hint can be changed to something else, to any class that is available on your class path. So I can also use this. A completely different class that I built myself, which is a gadget. And if you want to know more about serialization, deserialization, look at the talk I did 2 years ago, where I go in a deep dive on it. But I'm now doing a totally different class. And if I'm going to implement this class by my orders, import, choose file, and do the gadget.yaml, and I submit it, you will see, first of all, that it has a class cast exception, but as a side effect, I run the calculator, which is great. I still need to do my expenses, but this is the side effect of running things. Which means if this is able and you have a gadget somewhere on your class path, I can misuse this to execute things like opening your calculator or connect to another server or download a zip file or do a reverse shell attack. Something you don't want. All right. So one of the things that you need to do, and these are things if you still use Java 8 and the script engine is available, you can use that one. Or you can use the Sun row set to do an LDAP attack. Super easy. By the way, we all read documentation, right? No, just one person. This was in the documentation. But nobody reads it. Cool. Update to Snake YAML 2.0. Last one. Sensitive data. What a lot of people do is when we create APIs, we just use the entity and we output it, right? It's very easy to create an endpoint and just output all the people or all the personnel that I have in my system. For instance, I have an API call over here, and it goes to /person. Let's see if that works. API /person, and I will get all the people in my system. But this is just the full entity. The question is, do we need all this data? Do I need the username, the first name, the last name, maybe even here, the physical address? Think about it. Probably not. It's the easy way of doing it because I'm just getting my service or getting my repository, get all the users out, and it will be transposed to YAML or transposed to JSON. What should I do? If you are sure that some fields would never be serialized into JSON, you can just as easy do this, @JSON ignore. For instance, I already did that in my application. If I go to person, I did that with @JSON ignore for the encrypted password. So the encrypted password will never be showed. However, I can do the same with address, and then the address will not be shown. But is that a good practice? No. The thing is, what you should do, in my opinion, and yes, it needs a little work, but is to make sure that you create DTOs, data transfer objects. For every endpoint, create a specific object that only returns what is needed to be done. So if I only need to return from a user, either combined details or just the details from a person, I can do something like this. I can use an API person that I have over here, a specific record that only has the first name, last name, email, and phone number. And now instead of just using my normal repository as I did here, I can map over it and just create this output object on it and return it. And that way I never expose more information that I have. Even if my person will change later on and gets more fields or less fields, either my code breaks or it will still keep that contained amount of data and you will not leak data. Trust me, this is horrible because it happened to me once when I was working at one of the banks in the Netherlands. I won't call the name, you can just look at my LinkedIn page. This is not a joke. It was solved with just @JSON ignore. The fix took like 4 minutes, including deployment. The aftermath took 4 months by writing reports and what kind of data was leaked and that kind of stuff. Horrible, you don't want that. So be aware of your data, what is your input, what is your output, and create specific data transfers object for it, please. All right. A little bit time left. Yes, I wrote something about it. So how should we get started? You named all of these problems. It's quite easy. Start with the things that make the most impact first. So first of all, update your frameworks. If you're using Spring Boot, if you're using Quarkus, doesn't matter. Update it to the latest version. And yes, that might be a painful thing, but there are tools available like Open Rewrite from Modern or something like that that can help you with it with recipes. But please update your frameworks and try to stay updated because new fixes will be in newer versions, not always backported in older versions. And because the framework brings in so many new libraries, probably a lot of your open source stuff will get solved already. Then scan for vulnerabilities in your libraries. And if there are new vulnerabilities of libraries that are in there, either you put manually in, update them, update these libraries, or in some cases, if they are part of the framework, use, for instance, Maven's dependency management to overwrite specific versions of it, so you don't have these vulnerabilities available. After that, then you have the big pile of problems away, because you already saw in my application, my open source problems were huge. If I would update to Spring Boot 3.5, I think half of them would already be gone. And yes, they might not be exactly targeted, but they can be part of a chain of attacks. After that, go for your code, scan your vulnerabilities, and know what you're doing wrong. Like, take some education in that. There are enough lessons. We have Sneak Learn, for instance, to get you more into deep, like, hey, what is a path traversal vulnerability? Connected to the tool, there are links in it, but I'm not showing you everything here because it's not a product page. So scan your code vulnerabilities and then fix your code, because your code more probably has less impact than your libraries or your frameworks, because they will solve a ton of problems already. If you're using Docker containers, start at the Docker container level, because the operating system can bring in stuff as well. So start from the biggest end, go update that, and keep it up to date. Because if your libraries are not up to date, it will be a trouble to get them up to date if you wait for months, years, and you need to do more and more rework. So keep them up to date, and then start on your code. But do it as soon as possible, preferably on your local machine in your IDE. I hope this talk was useful. If you liked the talk, please go to this QR code and vote. If you do not like the talk, come over here and talk to me. Is that a deal? All right. For now, I will let you go. Have some great beers, some great wines, or some fun. And I hope to see you later here at the party, during karaoke or whatever. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great day. Cheers.